Hello everyone, and welcome to Part 1, Numbers. Numbers in Python have two main forms that we're going to be working with for this course. That's integers and floating point numbers. Integers are whole numbers, and floating point numbers have a decimal in them. So for example, an integer is something like 23, a floating point number is something like 23.5 or 23.0, etc. Alright, let's quickly walk through examples of some very basic arithmetic for Python, and we're also going to be covering variable assignment in Python and what makes it a dynamic programming language. Let's hop over to the Atom text editor to get started. Okay, here I am at the Atom text editor. Before we get started talking about numbers, integers, variables, and floating points, what I want to quickly discuss is the various ways you can run Python and play with Python. One way is to directly in your command prompt or terminal, just type Python. And if you've downloaded Anaconda, it should be set to the path, so you immediately see Python here. And you can directly type Python now into your command prompt or terminal, which means I can do something like this. I can say print, parentheses, and in quotes, hello world, hit enter, and I get the output hello world. So that's just the basic hello world with Python. Or I can type 2 plus 1, and since this is in the terminal or command prompt, if I hit enter, it directly gives me an output. In a script, it would not give me the output. I would have to say print 2 plus 1 if I was running a .py script. So let's show you how you can run a .py script. To exit out of this, you can just type quit, open and close parentheses, and now you've quit. And if you want to clear the screen, you can do CLS or clear, depending on your operating system. All right, so to actually run a script, what you need to know is the current file path you are in. So you can type pwd if you're on a Mac or Linux, or for a Windows computer, you should be able to just see it directly to your left, the entire file path. If you're unsure, you can always type cd, hit enter, and it outputs the file path right here. You'll notice that on my command prompt, I have something here in parentheses saying my Django env. That's a virtual environment I've set up. We'll discuss that when we talk about Django in a future lecture. You don't need to worry about that right now. All you need to know is being able to access whatever your current directory is, which is just cd, and then it should output the directory, or pwd if you're on a Mac or Linux. So what you need to do is create a folder here, or add this folder to your project folders in Atom. You can see here I've already added it, but if you needed to add it, you could just right-click here, and then select Add Project Folder, and then find this folder. What I'm going to do is under that project folder, I will right-click, say New File, and create a file. And I'm going to call it numbers, and I will make sure to give it the extension .py so that Atom knows it's a Python file, and so that Python also knows it's a Python file. Now let's discuss some very basic arithmetic. For basic arithmetic, addition is just 2 plus 1, and I can zoom in here a little bit so we can see it clearly. 2 plus 1 is addition, subtraction is just a minus sign, multiplication is just an asterisk, and division is just a /. Again, I'm not running these commands because they're so basic, and we covered a lot of this when we were talking about JavaScript. For actual powers, that is something like 2 to the power of 5, you just have two sets of asterisks. So this right here is 2 to the power of 5. And if you wanted to, you could also do roots this way. So maybe I want the square root of something. I can do 4 to the power of 0.5. That's the same as the square root. But later on, we'll show you how you can import the math module to do some more complicated maths and then take the square root that way. A couple more notes. Order of operations is followed in Python, so things like multiplication happening before addition or subtraction, that's all followed. So if I were to say something like 2 plus 10 times 10 plus 3, let's print this whole thing out and see what we get. So I'm going to print this, I will save it, and then if I want to actually run this file, all I have to do is at my command prompt, type Python, space, and then either the entire file path to the actual .py file, or if I'm in the same location as the .py file, just the name itself, so numbers.py. Then you can always do tab to help autocomplete this. Hit enter, and we see it's 105. For order of operations, though, if I wanted to affect this, I can always use parentheses. So let's say I want the actual addition to happen first. So I want 2 plus 10 to happen first before 10 and 10 get multiplied. Then I can just add sets of parentheses there to make sure that happens. So if I run this again, hit up on my arrow key, now I get 156. So a little bit different, and you can just use parentheses to specify the order of operations. Okay, now let's talk about variable assignment with Python. Python is a dynamic programming language, meaning you don't need to declare what a variable type is going to be before you actually just do the assignment. So Python variable assignment is very simple. All you have to do is choose the name of your variable, for instance, a, set it equal to whatever you want it to be, for instance, the number 5. And all those tabs that were popping up, that's just Atom AutoHelp there that we downloaded one of the plugins. Don't worry about that. You can just continue on without it. Later on, when we work with functions and object-oriented programming, it's going to be really useful, but for right now, you can just ignore it. If I want to see the output of this, I can just say print a. Let's save that. Run our script, which is python numbers.py, and here we see the output 5. I can then also add objects together. So for instance, a plus a, save it, run this, and I get 10 out. Python also supports reassignment, meaning I could do something like a is equal to a times 5, and then I could say print a, and now we would expect it to give out not just 10, but also 25. And if I ever want to make a comment in Python, I just need to do a hashtag and then type whatever comment I want. And as a quick note, by convention, usually you type comments above the code it references or right next to it. Okay, so that's the very basics of variable assignment and comments. There are a couple of rules you need to follow when creating variable names with Python. For one thing, Python variable names cannot start with a number. So you can't say something like 2 dogs is equal to 2 or something. What you would need to do is say 2 dogs is equal to whatever you want. Now keep in mind, usually when you're typing in Python and you have multiple words in your variables, you want to separate them using an underscore. And this is known as snake casing. So you would usually see something like this instead of camel casing, which is common with JavaScript, which would do something like that. And we'll discuss these rules later on when we talk about object-oriented programming. But for right now, just keep in mind, variable names cannot start with a number. They also can't start with certain symbols, and these symbols are in your notes, but it's usually pretty obvious stuff. Anything that's shift on a number, so you can't start it with basically any of these symbols right here, otherwise it'll mess up the variable name. Okay, now let's walk through a very quick example of using object names for variable assignment. I'm going to do a very simple example with my income equal to 100. We'll say my tax rate is equal to 0.1. My taxes is then equal to my income, and we can see here I'm being helped out, multiplied by tax rate. And then I'm going to print my taxes. We'll save that, see what we get when we run the script. I get 10.0. So notice I'm getting a floating point number. The first number was an integer, second number was a floating point number. When I multiply them together, Python automatically makes the result a floating point number. Okay, that's really all we need to know about numbers and variable assignments for now. Hopefully it was pretty straightforward. Thanks, and I'll see you at the next lecture.